The French president. In 1899, in Paris, Felix Faure served as the president of France. The 58-year-old leader had risen from working in his family's tannery to the highest office in France. Throughout his presidency, Faure conducted numerous affairs with married women, and in 1897 he began a liaison with Marguerite Steinheil, a married woman whose husband Adolphe was a portrait painter. Faure had commissioned Adolphe to paint his official portrait, and during the sittings he met the painter's wife and began inviting her to the Élysée Palace for private encounters. For 2 years, Marguerite visited the Salon Bleu, a private room in the palace, regularly for discreet encounters while palace staff looked the other way. On the afternoon of February 16, 1899, Faure summoned Marguerite to the palace for another encounter. They met in the Salon Bleu, and Marguerite performed oral sex on him while he reclined on the couch. Several minutes into the act, Faure's breathing became laboured, and his entire body suddenly went rigid. He let out a strange gasp, his hands clenched violently, and he collapsed backward onto the couch, semi-conscious. Marguerite pulled away and screamed for help, her voice echoing through the palace corridors. Palace staff rushed into the Salon Bleu and found the president slumped on the couch, his face purple and his breathing shallow, while Marguerite stood beside him adjusting her disheveled clothing. Servants quickly dressed both of them in presentable clothing before sending for Dr. Lanalong, the president's physician. Dr. Lanalong arrived and attempted to revive Faure with stimulants and bloodletting, but the president remained unconscious and never spoke again. 4 hours after the stroke, at 10 o'clock that evening, Felix Faure died from what doctors officially recorded as cerebral apoplexy. The palace issued an official statement claiming Faure had collapsed while working at his desk, making no mention of Marguerite's presence. Within hours, however, palace servants spread the true story throughout Paris, and by morning the entire city knew the president had died during oral sex with his mistress. Rumors circulated that during his final orgasm, Faure had suffered a seizure so violent that his hands clenched in Marguerite's hair and staff had to force his fingers open to free her, though no medical records ever confirmed this detail. The chicken coop death. In 2005, in a rural area near Hangzhou, China, a 53-year-old farmer named Lu lived alone in a small house with an unheated chicken coop just a few meters from his bedroom. Lu worked as a laborer, tending his backyard chickens, and lived reclusively with little contact with neighbors or family, keeping any unusual sexual fetishes completely hidden from the community. On a late evening during a winter storm when temperatures outside dropped to -10 degrees Celsius, Lu was watching pornography on his computer in his bedroom. For reasons that remain unexplained, Lu left his warm bedroom and walked outside into the freezing cold to the chicken coop, possibly seeking the thrill of environmental danger or drawn by some animal proximity fantasy, and entered wearing women's silk lingerie. Lu was engaging in solitary sexual activity in the freezing chicken coop when the physical exertion combined with the -10-degree temperature created a fatal medical emergency. The cold slowed his blood flow and constricted his blood vessels, while the physical exertion spiked his heart's oxygen demand, creating a deadly combination for a vulnerable middle-aged man. Within minutes, Lu suffered a massive heart attack, collapsed onto the frozen ground, and died. His body froze solid in the sub-zero temperatures over the next 24 hours before family members arrived at his property and discovered him. Police investigators found Lu's naked, frozen body in the chicken coop, surrounded by dead hens, with his computer still playing pornography in his bedroom and women's silk lingerie scattered on the coop floor. The family faced intense privacy invasions from neighbors and local gossip about the circumstances of Lu's death, and they quickly hushed up the incident to avoid further shame in their conservative rural community. The kitchen whisk aneurysm. In 2012, in Belgrade, Serbia, a 39-year-old woman lived alone in an apartment and took daily medication to manage her high blood pressure. She had an undiagnosed aneurysm in her brain, a weak bulge in a blood vessel that could rupture if her blood pressure spiked suddenly. One evening, while alone in her apartment, she was using an object for sexual stimulation when she experienced a sudden, catastrophic brain hemorrhage. The physical exertion had elevated her heart rate and blood pressure, and when her blood pressure suddenly spiked at climax, it ruptured a pre-existing aneurysm in her brain, flooding blood into the subarachnoid space and rapidly increasing intracranial pressure. Within minutes, she lost consciousness and died on the couch with the whisk handle still inserted in her rectum. Her ex-husband discovered her body the next day when he came to her apartment to check on her. Police found her lying on the couch, naked from the waist down, with the whisk still protruding from her anus. The autopsy revealed a ruptured aneurysm in her brain that had caused massive bleeding, confirming that the orgasm had triggered the blood pressure spike that killed her. The 12-hour Viagra bet. In February 2009, in Moscow, Russia, a 28-year-old auto mechanic named Sergei Tuganov accepted a bold sexual challenge from two women. The women bet him $4,300 that he could not have sex with them continuously for 12 hours. To win the bet, Sergei consumed an entire bottle of Viagra containing approximately 40 to 50 pills, which was 10 to 25 times the maximum safe daily dose. The two women rotated with Sergei for 12 straight hours with no breaks, while the massive dose of Viagra sustained his performance. The Viagra worked by blocking an enzyme in his blood vessels, which prolonged his erection, but also caused dangerous vasodilation, dehydration, and rapidly increased his heart rate throughout the marathon. Minutes later, after winning the bet, he clutched his chest and collapsed from a massive heart attack. One of the women, who identified herself only as Alina, called emergency services, but paramedics pronounced him dead on arrival. An autopsy confirmed that he died from a myocardial infarction caused by the combination of extreme sildenafil overdose and 12 hours of continuous physical exertion. Moscow police closed the case as an accidental death with no charges filed since the bet had been consensual. The rooftop fall. In the early morning hours of June 20th, 2007, in Columbia, South Carolina, 21-year-old former college students Brent Tyler and Chelsea Tumbleston climbed onto the sloped roof of a downtown office building to have sex under the stars. The roof was pyramid-shaped and made of metal panels that sloped at steep angles, and earlier that evening rain had fallen, leaving the metal surface slick and wet. They stripped completely naked and left their clothes in a pile near the roof access door, then moved to the center of the sloped surface and began having sex. The combination of their movements, the steep angle of the roof, and the slippery wet metal created a situation that went catastrophically wrong within minutes. As they moved together, their bodies began sliding down the slope, picking up momentum as the wet metal offered zero traction. They slid faster and faster down the pyramid roof until they flew off the edge and plummeted 50 feet straight down into the empty street below, still completely naked. At approximately 5 a.m., a taxi driver was cruising down the deserted downtown street when his headlights illuminated two naked bodies lying motionless in the road. He slammed on his brakes and immediately called police, who arrived to find both still alive but critically injured. Paramedics rushed them to Palmetto Health Richland Hospital, but both were pronounced dead shortly after arrival from massive injuries sustained in the fall. Police investigators climbed to the roof and found the couple's clothing neatly piled near the access door, and examining the wet, sloped metal surface, they quickly determined what had happened. The Richland County coroner confirmed both died from multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a high fall, and police ruled the deaths accidental. A police spokesman later told reporters it was quite uncommon to encounter two deceased naked individuals in the middle of the street at 5 a.m.